The Vellani research station floated peacefully around the giant gas planet, looking like a small shiny toy against the massive orange and blue swirls below. Commander Talara stood on the bridge, watching her people work quietly at their computers and instruments. They were scientists, not soldiers. Their job was to study the strange methane storms on the planet below and discover new things about how planets worked. Everything changed in seconds. Dark shapes suddenly appeared out of nowhere, materializing from the empty space like monsters stepping out of shadows. The Brutok Empire had arrived, and they brought death with them. Their ships were enormous, black metal beasts covered in weapons and armor. Red laser beams started cutting through the station's protective shields like hot knives through butter. Warning: hull breach on level 7. Someone shouted from across the bridge. The station shook violently as more weapons hit them. Lights flickered, and the smell of burning electronics filled the air. Talara gripped the railing as another explosion rocked the station. Her hands were shaking, but she kept her voice calm. Send out the emergency signal now. Tell everyone in the galaxy we need help immediately. The young communications officer, barely out of training, worked frantically at his console. His fingers flew over the buttons as he broadcast their desperate message across space. Mayday, Mayday. This is Vellani Research Station. We are under attack by Brutok forces, requesting immediate assistance from any allied vessels in range. Minutes felt like hours as they waited for responses. The first reply came from the Confederation. Sorry, we are too far away to help. Good luck. Then the Republic answered. We have our own problems right now. Cannot assist. The Alliance was even worse. Our ships are busy elsewhere. We regret we cannot help you. Each rejection was like a punch to the stomach. Talara watched more of her people die as the Brutok ships got closer. Their weapons were getting stronger, and the station's shields were almost gone. She started to think they would all die here, alone and forgotten. Then something impossible happened. A new voice came through the speakers, speaking with a strange accent none of them had heard before. Vellani Station, this is Admiral Lee of the human fleet. We got your message. Help is coming. Just hold on a little longer. Everyone on the bridge stopped what they were doing and stared at each other. Humans. Those weird newcomers from the edge of the galaxy. They had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago. Most people thought they were still primitive, flying around in old-fashioned ships with outdated weapons. What could they possibly do against the mighty Brutok Empire? Lieutenant Commander Park stood in front of the big screen, showing their battle situation, and what he saw made his stomach drop. 12 human ships. That was all they had. On the other side, more than 200 Brutok warships were attacking the helpless research station. The computer kept running the numbers over and over, and every calculation said the same thing. They were going to lose, badly. The bridge of the HSV. Determination was buzzing with quiet activity. Officers checked their weapons. Engineers made sure the engines were running perfectly. And everyone tried to stay calm, even though they all knew they were flying into what looked like certain death. But nobody complained. Nobody asked to turn around. They had a job to do. Admiral, Ensign, Kim called out from her position at the sensor station. Her voice was tight with worry. The long-range scanners are showing bad news. The Vellani station is falling apart fast. Their shields are almost gone, and their hull is cracking in multiple places. I'm calculating maybe 6 hours before the whole thing breaks apart, and everyone inside dies. Admiral Lee stood perfectly still in the center of the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back. He had gray hair and calm eyes that never seemed to panic, no matter how bad things got. He looked at the tactical display for a long moment, studying the positions of enemy ships and thinking about their options. Then we get there in 5 hours, he said simply, like he was talking about the weather instead of an impossible rescue mission. Send the signal to all ships in our fleet. Tell them to get ready for dragon formation. I want every weapon loaded, every engine at maximum power, and every pilot ready to fight the moment we drop out of hyperspace. Engineer Han, a young man who had been working frantically at his computer console, suddenly looked up with an expression of hope mixed with fear. Sir, I've been thinking about something important. The Brutok Empire has been fighting wars for thousands of years. They know how every other species fights. They have plans for everything. He paused, wiping sweat from his forehead. But they've never fought humans before. They don't know our tactics, our strategies, or how we think. They're expecting us to follow the same boring battle plans that everyone else uses. That's our only real advantage. Admiral Lee smiled for the first time since they received the distress call. Son, sometimes one advantage is all you need to win a war. The Brutok think they know what's coming. They expect us to line up our ships in neat rows and have an old-fashioned space battle where the biggest fleet wins. He turned to face his crew, and everyone could see the determination in his eyes. We're going to show them something completely different, something they've never seen before and won't know how to handle. Space twisted and rippled like water as the human fleet suddenly appeared out of hyperspace. One moment there was nothing but empty darkness, and the next moment 12 human warships were floating there like they had been waiting all along. The transition was so smooth and quiet that it took the Brutok sensors several seconds to even detect them. Captain Yang stood on the bridge of his destroyer, the Inchen, watching the massive enemy fleet spread out before them. 200 Brutok ships versus 12 human vessels. Any sane military commander would have retreated immediately, but Yang just smiled and started giving orders. Launch all fighters now, he commanded. I want every pilot in space within 60 seconds. And remember, don't fly like the textbooks, say fly like humans. The fighter bays opened up and dozens of small, fast ships poured out like angry wasps from a disturbed nest. But instead of forming the neat, orderly battle lines that every other galactic military used, the human fighters scattered in all directions, moving in patterns that looked completely random and chaotic. Wing Commander Choi's voice crackled over the radio to all the fighter pilots. Listen up, everyone. We've trained for this our whole lives. The enemy has bigger ships and more weapons, but they think in straight lines. We don't. Remember what they taught us back home. We're not here to fight fair. We're not here to look good, and we're definitely not here to follow their rules. We're here to win, and we're going to win fast. From the massive Brutok command ship, their admiral watched the human fleet with amusement. He had conquered dozens of star systems and destroyed hundreds of enemy fleets. These humans looked like children playing with toys compared to his mighty armada. He opened a communication channel, his voice dripping with mockery and contempt. 12 primitive little ships. The Brutok commander laughed, the sound echoing across all frequencies. This is almost insulting. Your people must have sent you here to die as some kind of joke. This battle will be over before it even begins. Surrender now, and I might let some of you live as slaves. But the humans weren't listening to his threats. Pilot Officer Lee was already diving her fighter toward the enemy formation, her hands steady on the controls, despite the massive firepower being aimed at her. Her squadron followed her every move, trusting her completely as they plunged into the heart of the enemy fleet. This is the Human Expeditionary Force, she announced calmly over the open channel. We got a distress call from people who needed help. That's all the reason we need to be here. Then the real fighting began, and the Brutok quickly realized they had never seen anything like it before. Deep inside the assault carrier Busan, Major Kim watched his Marines check their weapons and armor one final time. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They were Space Marines, trained to fight in the cramped corridors and zero-gravity environments of enemy ships. The ship around them groaned and shook as 3 massive Brutok cruisers pounded it with everything they had. Listen up, Marines. Kim shouted over the noise of explosions and alarms. In 30 seconds, we're going to punch a hole in that Brutok command ship and go inside. They think we're crazy for trying this. They think we should run away, or give up like everyone else does. He paused as another blast nearly knocked him off his feet. Sparks showered down from damaged lights above their heads. But here's what they don't understand about humans. When they expect us to retreat, we charge forward. When they expect us to surrender, we fight twice as hard. When they think they've beaten us, that's when we become most dangerous. Meanwhile, Captain Essio was performing what could only be described as impossible flying. Her small corvette twisted and spun through a field of floating metal debris, pieces of Brutok ships that had already been destroyed. Laser beams and missiles flew all around her, but she used the wreckage as shields, hiding behind chunks of twisted metal while her weapons officer looked for targets. There, her gunner shouted, pointing at a Brutok heavy cruiser that was turning to attack the Villani station. I have a clear shot at their engine section. Sio rolled the ship sideways and dove under a floating piece of hull plating. Take it. And remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves. Those people on the station are counting on us. All across the battlefield, human ships were doing things that made no sense, according to normal military tactics. They appeared where the enemy least expected them, attacked from impossible angles, and used strategies that seemed completely insane. But somehow, it was working. On the flagship communications officer Park's face was grim as he read the casualty reports. Admiral Lee, sir, we're losing ships fast. The destroyer Mokbo just took a direct hit to the engine room. The cruiser is venting atmosphere. We've lost almost half our fighters. Admiral Lee stared at the tactical display, watching the dots that represented his ships and his people. Each one that disappeared meant friends and comrades who had died fighting to save strangers. But he could see that their desperate plan was actually working. The Brutok fleet was confused and disorganized, no longer the disciplined force they had been at the start of the battle. Send the signal to all remaining ships, he said quietly. Implement Protocol 7 immediately. Protocol 7 was something no other military in the galaxy would even consider. It meant turning their own ships into weapons, flying them directly into enemy vessels to cause maximum damage. It was suicide, but it was also the only way to save the Villani station and everyone aboard it. Just when the battle seemed hopeless, space rippled again as more ships emerged from hyperspace. But these weren't sleek military warships with armor and proper weapons. Instead, a strange collection of civilian vessels appeared, cargo ships, passenger liners, research vessels, and even a few private yachts. They had come from all over human space, volunteers who had heard the distress call and decided they couldn't just sit at home while people were dying. Captain Han stood on the bridge of what used to be a simple cargo hauler, called the Dancing Crane. Just 3 days ago, it had been carrying supplies between colonies. Now its cargo holds were packed with fighter jets and makeshift weapons that his crew had bolted onto the hull wherever they could find space. This is absolutely insane, muttered Engineer Yoon as he worked frantically at a control panel that was sparking and smoking. He was trying to redirect power from the ship's life support systems to feed the jury-rigged laser cannons they had installed. We're not soldiers. We're just regular people. I fix air conditioning systems for a living. Captain Han watched through the view screen as Brutok ships fired at the dying Villani station. He could see sections of the research facility breaking apart, with people probably still trapped inside. You're right. We're not soldiers, he said calmly. We're something better. We're humans who heard that someone needed help. He turned to face his volunteer crew, mechanics, teachers, shopkeepers, and office workers who had never fired a weapon in their lives. And humans don't abandon people who are in trouble. We don't care if it's dangerous. We don't care if the odds are impossible. When someone calls for help, we answer. Nearby, the passenger liner, New Seoul, had been transformed into something that looked like a floating weapons platform. The luxury dining rooms were now gun batteries manned by passengers, who had volunteered to stay and fight instead of evacuating to safety. Retired veterans worked alongside college students, all of them operating weapons they had learned to use by watching training videos during the journey here. Medical officer Shin had turned her research vessel into a flying hospital. The laboratories, where she used to study plant samples, were now operating rooms filled with medical equipment donated by hospitals across human space. Attention all ships, she broadcast. We're ready to receive wounded. I don't care if they're human Villani, or even Brutok. If they're hurt, we'll help them. The civilian fleet threw themselves into the battle with the same crazy courage their military had shown. Cargo ships rammed Brutok fighters. Passenger liners used their powerful engines to push enemy vessels into each other, and research ships deployed their scientific equipment as improvised weapons. They had no training, no proper equipment, and no chance of survival. But they fought anyway, because that's what humans do. Wing Commander Chen gripped his fighter's controls as he led what remained of his squadron toward the massive Brutok flagship. When the battle started, he had 24 fighters under his command. Now only 6 were left, their hulls scarred and smoking from countless near misses with enemy fire. But they kept flying forward, weaving through a storm of laser blasts and missiles that lit up space like deadly fireworks. Stay tight, everyone, Chen spoke into his radio, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. We've come too far to quit now. Through his cockpit window, he could see the enormous Brutok command ship growing larger and larger. It was the size of a small city, bristling with weapons and armor that should have made it impossible to attack. But Chen wasn't thinking about the odds anymore. He was thinking about the Villani families trapped on that research station, the children who were probably scared and crying, the scientists who had only wanted to study stars and planets in peace. For everyone who can't fight back, he whispered to himself as he locked his targeting system onto the ship's bridge tower. Meanwhile, deep inside the Villani station, the fighting had moved to the corridors and docking bays. Marine Sergeant O crouched behind an overturned table that served as cover, her rifle smoking from constant use. Around her, the members of her squad were running low on ammunition and energy, but they refused to give up their position. The docking bay was crucial. If the Brutok soldiers could secure it, they could bring in reinforcements and heavy weapons that would doom everyone on the station. So, O and her Marines had turned it into a fortress, using everything they could find as weapons and barriers. Sergeant Corporal Song called out as he slammed a fresh power cell into his rifle. I count at least 40 more Brutok soldiers coming through the breach. We're outnumbered 3-1, and they're not backing down. Song was young, barely out of training, and O could hear the fear in his voice. But she also heard something else, determination, the kind of stubborn refusal to quit that made humans different from every other species in the galaxy. Then we'll stop 40 more, O replied, checking her grenades and improvised explosives. That's what we do, Song. We don't run when things get tough. We don't surrender when the enemy has more guns. We find a way to win, no matter what it takes. She had turned the docking bay into a maze of traps and surprises. Electrical cables had been rigged to electrocute anyone who stepped on them. Sections of the floor had been weakened so they would collapse under the weight of advancing soldiers. Even the lighting system had been weaponized, ready to blind the enemy at crucial moments. All across the battlefield, something strange was happening to the Brutok forces. These aliens had conquered dozens of worlds using overwhelming firepower and predictable tactics. But humans didn't fight like anyone else, and the constant surprises were starting to break their confidence. The moment came suddenly, like a dam breaking under too much pressure. Across the battlefield, Brutok ships that had been attacking with ruthless confidence just minutes earlier were now turning away and fleeing. Their formations broke apart as captains abandoned their battle positions and ran for the safety of hyperspace. Admiral Lee watched the tactical display as enemy contacts began disappearing from his screens. Any other military commander in the galaxy would have been satisfied with this victory. The enemy was retreating, the civilians were safe, and the mission was complete. But Lee wasn't like other commanders, and humans weren't like other species. All ships, listen carefully, he announced over the fleet communication system. We're going after them. I want every Brutok vessel followed and harassed until they're completely out of this sector. We don't stop chasing them until they're so far away they'll need 3 days just to think about coming back. Captain Jun commanded one of the few remaining human frigates, and her ship had taken a beating during the battle. Scorch marks covered the hull, several weapons weren't working, and her crew had been fighting for hours without rest. But when the order came to pursue the enemy, nobody complained. "Sir, look at this," reported Tactical Officer Kang, pointing at his scanner display with excitement. "The Brutok fleet is completely scattered. They're not even trying to maintain formation anymore. They're just running as fast as their engines can carry them." Captain Jun smiled with grim satisfaction as she watched the once mighty enemy armada fleeing in panic. "Perfect. Maybe after today, they'll remember what happens when you attack innocent people. Maybe they'll think twice before they decide to pick on researchers and scientists who never hurt anyone." For 3 whole days, the human fleet followed the retreating Brutok forces across space. They didn't try to destroy every enemy ship. That wasn't the point. Instead, they wanted to send a message that would spread throughout the galaxy. The message was simple, but powerful. If you harm innocent people, humanity will find you, and humanity will make you pay. They used hit-and-run tactics, appearing suddenly to damage engines and weapon systems before disappearing again. They disrupted the Brutok ship's attempts to regroup and reorganize. Most importantly, they made sure every enemy captain understood that humans would never forget what they had done to the Villani station. Navigator So was plotting their course back to the research station when something unexpected came through the communication system. "Admiral Lee, we're getting a strange message from the Villani station commander. She's asking for permission to surrender to us." Lee looked confused for a moment, then started laughing, not the cruel laugh of a conqueror, but the warm laugh of someone who had just heard something absurd. "Send a message back to them. Tell them we don't accept surrenders from people we came here to rescue. We're not conquerors, we're neighbors who heard someone calling for help." In the medical bay of the Villani research station, Dr. Moon worked side by side with alien doctors who had completely different ideas about how to treat injuries. The Villani used advanced machines and complicated procedures that took hours to complete. But Moon used simple techniques that her grandmother might have recognized: cleaning wounds carefully, setting broken bones by hand, and talking gently to scared patients. The other galactic species had always looked down on human medicine as old-fashioned and backward. But something strange was happening in the medical bay. Patients who received human-style treatment were healing faster and feeling better than those treated with the most advanced alien technology. A young Villani researcher lay on one of the medical beds, her arm badly burned from a Brutok energy weapon. She watched Dr. Moon work with quiet amazement as the human doctor cleaned and bandaged the wound with her own hands instead of using machines. "I don't understand," the Villani whispered, her voice weak but filled with confusion. "Your people didn't know us. We had never met before today. You had no reason to risk your lives for strangers. So why did you come? Why did humans travel across the galaxy to fight for people you had never seen before?" Dr. Moon looked up from her work and smiled gently. It was the kind of smile that made patients feel safe, the same smile she had given to thousands of people over the years. "Because you asked for help," she said simply, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. "That's what neighbors do. When someone is in trouble, you help them. It doesn't matter if you've never met them before. Meanwhile, in the engineering sections of the damaged station, Chief Engineer Bay was doing something that amazed the Vallani technical staff. He wasn't just fixing the systems that had been broken during the battle, he was making them better than they had ever been before. The defensive shields were now twice as strong as their original design. The communication arrays could reach further into space than ever before. Even the life support systems were running more efficiently than the day that station was first built. The Vallani station commander watched in bewilderment as human engineers worked around the clock, using tools and techniques that seemed impossibly simple, but got incredible results. "How much will this cost us?" he finally asked Bay. "We don't have much money, but we'll find a way to pay for all these improvements." Bay looked up from the power coupling he was installing and laughed. "Cost? There's no cost. Consider it a housewarming gift from your new human neighbors. We just want to make sure you're safe if something like this happens again." All across the galaxy, news reports were broadcasting something that no one had ever seen before. The footage showed 12 small human ships defeating a massive enemy fleet through pure determination and courage. Reporters showed clips of human fighter pilots deliberately crashing their ships into enemy vessels to protect civilians they had never met. They broadcast images of human doctors treating wounded Brutok soldiers with the same care they gave to their own people. The galaxy watched human engineers working for free to rebuild what had been destroyed, human soldiers refusing rewards for their service, and human captains who said they were just doing what anyone should do when someone asks for help. 6 months after the battle at Vallani Station, everything had changed. Admiral Lon stood in the command center of a brand new space station that orbited Earth like a protective guardian. The station was massive, built with the combined efforts of every human colony and settlement. But its most important feature wasn't its size or its weapons. It was the enormous communication array that could send and receive messages from anywhere in the known galaxy. The command center buzzed with activity 24 hours a day. Hundreds of communication officers sat at their stations, listening for distress calls from across space. Every few minutes, red lights would flash on the big display board as another cry for help reached Earth. "Admiral," called Communications Officer Lim from her station near the center of the room. "We've got 17 new requests for assistance that came in just today. 3 mining colonies under attack by pirates, 2 research ships trapped in asteroid fields, 1 passenger liner with engine failure, and 11 other situations ranging from natural disasters to hostile alien encounters." Admiral Un walked over to the main tactical display, a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy that showed the positions of human fleets in real time. Green dots represented human ships that were already rushing to help people in trouble. There were dozens of them, scattered across hundreds of star systems. "Send orders to dispatch every available unit," Un said calmly. "The 5th Fleet can handle the pirate attacks. The rescue ships can help with the engine failures, and the engineering corps can deal with the natural disasters. If someone needs help, we answer. It's that simple." This had become the unofficial motto of the Human Rapid Response Command. If someone needs help, we answer. It didn't matter who was calling for help, where they were located, or whether they could pay for assistance. If a distress signal reached Earth, human ships would respond. Lieutenant Nam, who managed communications with other galactic governments, looked up from her console with an expression of mild annoyance. "Sir, we've received another formal request from the Galactic Council. They want to schedule a meeting with human leadership to discuss what they call formalizing human involvement in peacekeeping operations. They're using a lot of fancy political language, but basically they want to control what we do and where we go." Admiral On smiled and shook his head. The Galactic Council was made up of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. They were used to making rules that everyone else had to follow, and they didn't understand why humans kept ignoring their bureaucracy and red tape. "Send them a polite message," Han replied. Tell them we're honored by their interest in our activities. Tell them we respect their authority and appreciate their concern for galactic stability. But also make it clear that we don't need anyone's permission to help people who are in trouble. Throughout the galaxy, something remarkable was happening. In markets and spaceports, in schools and government buildings. In the quiet corners where ordinary people lived their lives, a new phrase was being whispered and repeated. In dozens of different languages, using hundreds of different words, the message was always the same: the humans are coming. For some people, pirates, slavers, and those who made their living by hurting others, these words were a threat that made them look over their shoulders and sleep badly at night. For others, honest merchants, peaceful researchers, and families just trying to make a living, the phrase was a promise that help would always be available when they needed it most. But for those who found themselves alone in the darkness of space, surrounded by enemies or facing impossible odds, those three simple words had become something even more important than a threat or a promise. They had become hope itself,